Hi, I want to respond quickly to one Mr. Matt Thompson. Point one. He says here the following. I believe that host Eric's TE, being slightly more developed, gave him an edge when it came to putting his ideas to words in an empirical way. I don't think that's TE, first of all. I think that's probably TI you're talking about. Lacey, what do you got? Stop. And then the next thing, I wonder if host Eric allowed this exchange to go on for as long as it did simply to observe or exercise Zach's TE or GI. I didn't allow it to go on. That would imply that I was not trying hard or something. You know, like I was just. I could have put it into it any time, kind of a thing. I mean, well, it's simply not the case. I was trying to make my point. He was not persuaded by it. I still maintain that he's wrong about it, and you're wrong about what you're saying too. And here's why. You say race is like species, except it's not. A species, we have a clear, distinct test. If that animal mates with that animal, does it produce a offspring that can itself reproduce? It's a bright line. Now, you might say, well, there's no reason to draw a distinction there, like that particular bright line. But the answer is, yeah, there is a reason. It's the fact that it's a particular bright line. Not everything operates like that. For example, tallness. You might choose to gather, instead of people by skin color, gather all the tall people in the world together and call them a race. Say, it's the tallers. It's those damn tallers. Always being too tall, banging their heads into things. Fucking tallers. I hate those fucking tallers, dude. They're awful. Could be that. I mean, but we don't choose to. If we were to take all the tall people, we would take all the people with similar physique to me, regardless of race, quote unquote. Take all the black people who have a similar physique to me, and all the Chinese people who have a similar physique to me. And then you take all the people who have a similar physique to somebody who's more, portly or, squat, let's say. Somebody who's the opposite kind of person, shorter and stockier. Well, are those two sets of people going to have more in common than the white people will with the black people and the Asian people? How many races are there? These are sort of questions that prevent us from saying race is actually a real thing in the way that we can say that species is real. There is no such bright line. And here's why. Because with species, we're talking about a specific genetic recipe that creates a working organism. Changing that recipe a little bit results in a non-working organism. In contrast, when we're talking about race, we're talking about a bunch of different variables. So, okay, look, hey, we found Group A. Group A, there's somebody who are Africans. They're Africans from Africa right now. Forget African Americans. We found some straight up Africans. Group A. And lo and behold, these three particular traits out of this whole set of traits, these are all correlation numbers. The strength of correlation. 1 being the strongest possible correlation. Oh my God, this genetic marker, 1-to-1. 100% of this group of Africans in Group A has this. That's it. That's the genetic marker for Africanness. Okay. So then they go up to Northern Africa, Group B. Also, a group of Africans look fairly similar. At least they're dark still. And now you look at their group thing, and the one that's 1-to-1 in that first group is 0.41. But This other one that's 2,1 in the first group is now 1. And this other one, 0.97, is now 0.001. And wait, this group of black people doesn't share the same correlations as this other group of black people. Which one of them is black? Well, but that's not how it works, Eric. I mean, all black people do have those. That's for Asians. And they're saying they found a group of 4 genetic clusters that almost all of the Asians, people who self-identify as Asian, also have, right? But all that proves, see, the thing here is it's begging the question, because you're going in saying, look, we can tell that there are these different races. Those are black people, those are white people, those are Asian people, and they're obviously different. You can see that they're different. Now let's find the genetic proof that they are different. And if you take that group of Asian people and say, can we find markers that all of you have? You all self-identify as Asian, and you all have these 4 markers. Well, then there's the correlation. Well, okay, but couldn't you also do that with any other thing that you notice about people, like their height, like their I don't know. I mean, yeah, you're saying, oh, you self-identify as this ethnicity. But what does that mean? What's it referencing? The idea of race existed before we figured out which genetic markers it represented it. So, okay, fine. We're figuring out that these genetic markers represent thing X. But the problem is, we don't have white people who end right at Europe, and then all of a sudden you've got black people. We've got like Italians in between that don't really look the same as white people because they're a little bit darker, or at least depends on who you ask. When I say, well, what about people who are a combination? You say, well, they're mixed race. But the problem is, this isn't like species. There is no clear, bright line. This is like the color blue. This is like, it represents a range of things. This is like a cold day. It represents a range of things. It has no bright line because it's not a real thing. No matter how many genetic markers we find that correlate with people's self-identifying as a certain race, in order for it to actually mean something, we'd have to be able to know what that race was. What is it besides just, oh, their ancestors came from that area? If it's anything other than that, then where are the limits of that area? Where are the boundaries? How do you know when you are too far astray from that central area of white people that you're no longer white? What if you're neither white nor black, but something in between? What if you're Middle Eastern? What race is that? What race are Mexicans? They're part native. What race is that? How many races are there? Which is another question I already asked. Are different kinds of white people different sub-races? Is my Germanic whiteness different than Anglo-Saxon whiteness? Are we both equally white? Are all Asians the same race? Are Japanese people the same race as Koreans? If so, why do they look kind of different? How, if you say that somebody's race is a specific thing, how much do I need to have before I qualify as black? And if it in fact is real but non-falsifiable, then well, I mean, but it's not. Your point is that it's not non-falsifiable, but its falsifiability test is going to be arbitrary. It's going to be which of these things you pick. And even if you could find 3 that every single person who self-identifies as black has, does that thing cause blackness? And if so, do any other races also have that thing? Do they then become black? What makes one set of these things a preferable mechanism than another? There is no explanation for that. Because they all reference the same thing, which is, well, how do you know he's black? In the first place. Well, he says he is. Okay, well, what if he doesn't say he is, but everybody else says he is? Well, we'd be able to verify that everybody else is right. Okay, well, how? Well, we'd use this genetic test. Okay, but have we agreed upon which set of genetic markers to weigh more heavily? If he's this group B kind of black person, is he still black? Are we agreeing on that set of genetic markers? Because this set, it could be black, or it's almost a stronger correlation with Northern Italians, actually. It turns out there's a small population in in Russia that has a similar spread. And scientists have a couple of different possible reasons. Maybe they had some sort of ancestral tree split way back when. Who is white? Who's not white? Who is Hispanic? What is Hispanic anyway? Is that a race? Who is Asian? These questions can't be answered because it's fundamentally not like species. Species, there's a bright line. This, there's not. And that's the question we have to ask in all these sort of things. If there is a bright line, then it is something that is useful. And we are talking about something meaningful. If there's no bright line, and we're arguing about whether or not somebody's white or black, we're just saying, he's tall. No, he's not that tall. That's tall, dude. Come on. Anybody would agree that's tall. No, I don't think he's that tall. Doesn't seem that tall to me. It's got to be at least like 6'5". I've seen plenty of people like 6'5". That's not that tall. They wouldn't call that tall. Well, I'd call that tall. Yeah, I think you got to be at least 6'6" to be tall. That's what the fuck we're talking about. And you're like, well, there's no doubt that there is such a real thing as tall, Eric. I mean, somebody who's 6'11" is obviously tall. Nobody's going to say that person's not tall. Well, that's true, but that doesn't mean it's because of genetic things. It's because we've chosen a shorthand to understand sets of traits. And one of the shorthand words we've used is race and racial attribution. However, number one, we don't agree upon what set of traits that attribution represents. Number two, there's no clear bright line that could be agreed upon that would work to show anywhere close to 100% accuracy a correlation between somebody's self-identification of race and certain genetic markers. Number four, the fact that they found a large population of Asians who share 4 genetic clumps and also self-identify as Asians, and it's a near certainty, doesn't prove race. It just proves that people from the same ancestral background share similar traits. But race is making additional claims beyond that. And it's hard to say exactly what they are. It's either, though, saying, well, people who look like this are the same because they share the same behavioral traits, behavioral tendencies, structural differences, appearance differences, habits or character, or I don't know. What exactly are we talking about this for? This is the thing. The race conversation assumes that individuals who are of certain ancestral background are in fact fundamentally, biologically different in some way from one another because of their ancestral backgrounds. But they're different in every way from one another because they're individuals. And there's no reason at all to think that their ancestral background is a factor of more significance than any other, except insofar as we falsely attribute it significance because we falsely attribute it more solidity than it actually has. And the reason is not because we're just wrong about race, not because we are being too literal and not listening to Eric's metaphorical whatever nonsense. It's because we're not accustomed to asking ourselves some simple questions like, is there in fact a difference between species and race? If so, what is it? The answer is yes, there is a difference. One has a clear, bright line, the other doesn't. And that's why race is not a real thing. It's a choice of, it's basically, it's the sharpshooter's fallacy. Look, 4 bullseyes. Well, that's because you went and drew the shape of the bullseye around the holes. You know what I'm saying? That's the problem.